The silent power of walking away. Nietzsche's wisdom. What if the most decisive act of your life is the one no one sees? No speeches, no slammed doors, no dramatic farewell, just the soundless click of a latch and the weight of your own footsteps moving somewhere the stories about you cannot follow. Imagine a power that doesn't shout, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't ask permission. A power that simply leaves. On a high plateau in the Swiss Alps, a man in a warm coat once walked until the tone slipped out of his voice and the world grew quiet enough to hear the weather inside his skull. He walked under a sun so precise it sliced his thoughts into sharp points. He walked because standing still was killing him. There, on a stone that would later become legend, he felt an idea arrive like a storm without thunder. What if everything you are about to live will have to be lived again exactly the same countless times? If you knew that, would you dare to stay where you stand? Or would you have the courage to walk away? Nietzsche didn't simply write about walking. He thought with his feet. He believed the mind works differently in motion. He believed that some decisions can't be argued into existence. They have to be walked into. He had walked away from a life that looked perfect. A professor at 24, a prodigy with a desk and a nameplate, the polite congratulations of a future that would have been acceptable to everyone but him. He walked away from mentors who became monuments and then prisons, from the warmth of a circle that began softly to suffocate him. He left not to be free of responsibility, but to choose his responsibilities more carefully. There is a difference. We are trained to measure strength by how long we endure, not by what we refuse. We tell ourselves that staying is noble and walking away is failure. But have you ever felt the way a room reshapes your spine? The way certain conversations make your words smaller each time? The way a dream feels after it has been applauded and then domesticated? Nietzsche would ask a brutal question. Are you staying because you love it, or because you're afraid you'll be no one without it? The silent power of walking away is not rebellion for its own sake. It's not a tantrum or a pose. It's the art of saying no without spectacle. It's the refusal to trade your becoming for a seat at a table that feeds on your hesitation. Look at the men and women you secretly admire. They all have a doorway behind them, a series of exits they dared to take before the room caught fire. They knew something Nietzsche knew. You cannot create with the same hands that cling. When Nietzsche broke with his great friend and idol, the composer Richard Wagner, he did it the way he did most things, with a silence that cut deeper than any public quarrel. He didn't topple the statue. He stepped out from under it. He understood that leaving is not about shutting someone else down. It's about refusing to be pulled into the gravitational well of someone else's values. You can love a person and still walk away from the theater of their power. You can respect a tradition and still leave the shrine when the incense starts to smell like anesthesia. A clean exit is a declaration. My future is not your certainty. There is a peculiar terror in that kind of freedom. It takes a particular stamina to resist the comfort of explanations. People will want a story that makes them safe. They want you to name a villain. They want your departure to be a public performance of betrayal or righteousness. But the strongest exits don't give the audience that pleasure. They leave behind a shape of silence that cannot be filled with gossip. They let the space do the speaking. The room will rearrange itself to hide the hole you left. The room will get louder. The room will accuse. The room will remember you wrong. That is not your problem. The quiet is part of your strategy. Nietzsche preferred the clarity that only solitude can afford. He was not a hermit by temperament. He loved conversation, laughter, the music of company. But he was willing to lose it all to keep his inner weather intact. He wrote his harshest truths with the care of someone who hoped to be proved wrong and knew he wouldn't be. He told himself, he told anyone who would listen, that you have to leave long before a place is done with you. No one claps for that, but no one forgets it either. Think of your life right now as a city of rooms. In each room, a version of you performs your part. The agreeable colleague, the mild son or daughter, the loyal friend who doesn't ask for too much, the lover who listens more than he speaks, the citizen who nods at slogans he doesn't believe. Nietzsche would ask you to walk the hallway in your mind and put your hand on each doorknob. Which ones turn too easily? Which ones are locked from the inside? If you stand very still, you can sometimes hear your life telling the truth to itself. And what it says is often this: the door opens the moment you stop trying to prove you deserve to leave. There is a superstition that saying no will make the world smaller. Nietzsche's experience was the opposite. Every no he dared, leaving a secure career, ending a friendship that had become an empire, letting go of the hope that one person would save him, didn't shrink his life. It gave his yes somewhere to go. Saying no to one path revealed 1,000 unnamed others. He was not always rewarded. He was often punished. But the punishment had an interesting side effect. It stripped away the illusions that had been feeding him badly. He could finally see what was nourishing and what was narcotic. If you're waiting for permission, it won't come. If you're waiting for the perfect reason, it does not exist. The world won't change color to signal that now is the time to reclaim your life. It will keep its rhythm, politely indifferent, while you decide whether to keep orbiting a sun that drains you or walk. Nietzsche's wisdom is not a comfortable pillow. It is a cold wind at your back, a whisper that says, you will be misunderstood either way. Choose the misunderstanding that lets you breathe. Some decisions announce themselves with trumpets. Others arrive like a coat you didn't know you were already wearing. By the time Nietzsche knew he had to go, he had already gone in his heart. He had already taken the long walk down the mountain in his mind. He had already let the city grow smaller in his eyes. What remains after such a decision is a strange kind of grace. The world becomes crisp again. Your appetite returns. You realize how much of your sadness came from trying to belong to what did not want you, except as an echo. Walk with him for a moment on that high path. The air is clean enough to cut you. The sky is the color of an idea that refuses to be named. He walks not to escape, but to approach. He is moving toward the version of himself that cannot be assembled in a crowd. Every step is an argument his body has won. Every mile is a practice in refusing to sell time to people who spend it without thinking. He is light, not because he has less to carry, but because he can finally carry it by himself. The silent power of walking away is not a technique. It is a temperament you train. You practice it by declining small invitations that splinter your attention. You practice it by letting someone else be disappointed without rushing to fix it. You practice it by closing your mouth when your pride craves one last speech. Over time, the quiet becomes a ground you can stand on. You realize that you are never more persuasive than when you do not need to persuade. Somewhere between the valley and the ridge, Nietzsche understood that progress often looks like abandonment. You leave a city to invent a village. You leave a we to rescue an I. You walk away from a script to recover a voice that does not need applause to believe itself. That is the hook. That is the forbidden truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for the world is to stop selling it a version of yourself that fits. Imagine the whisper you hear after every goodbye. Are you sure? It's not the world's question. It's a ghost you built out of habit. It wears the face of your family, your mentors, your younger self, who loved the first room so much he can't imagine there's a second. This is the gravity of the familiar. This is the undertow of the herd, whose deepest law is simple. Don't make us rethink our comfort. Nietzsche had a name for the psychology that pulls us back into bad agreements. Resentment, the sour alchemy that turns our lack of courage into a moral story about why leaving is cruel. You will encounter this force at the doorway. It will try to convert your silence into guilt. It will say that to go is to harm, that your difference is an insult to the group, that staying is kinder. It will hand you masks and ask you to apologize for your lungs. Nietzsche saw how pity, the virtue paraded in soft voices and tearful rhetoric, can be a velvet rope that keeps us small. He did not despise compassion. He despised the kind that prefers you wounded. The status quo loves a crisis it can manage. It fears a life that no longer needs permission to become. There was a time when Nietzsche himself mistook thunder for truth. He stood in Bayreuth, Wagner's new temple to himself, and felt the narcotic of belonging. Music shook the lungs. The room glowed with a ceremonial warmth. He could have been a high priest forever, celebrated as a loyal mind in service of a grand cultural project. But beneath the applause, he sensed a rot. Calculation dressed in genius, a theater of power disguised as art. He noticed the way his questions were slowly coached into compliments. He noticed how his doubts were translated into defective loyalty, and so he did the unthinkable. He left the empire and kept his soul. What does it cost to do this? Everything you thought you had already paid. If you walk away for real, you lose not only a person or a place, you lose the story that made you safe inside it. Nietzsche lost friends, positions, the warm hand of a public that had been trained to applaud what he now refused. He lost health. His body punished him with migraines and storms of light that tore the sky in half. He slept badly. He ate plainly. He worked alone. He learned the names of his devils by listening to them at night. And every morning he woke to the same choice. Go back and be comfortable, or go on and be honest. The world outside the herd is not glamorous. It looks like long walks on empty roads, a notebook that doesn't care if anyone reads it, and a faith that can't be borrowed. Nietzsche's notebooks are full of sentences that started as footsteps. He wrote like someone trying to breathe through a narrow door. When he said that great thoughts are born while walking, he wasn't prescribing a fitness plan. He was confessing the only way he knew to escape the intellectual suffocation of rooms where ideas are traded like currency. Movement interrupts ritual. It breaks the conversational hypnosis that teaches us to confuse consensus with clarity. And then there is love. The quiet that follows the end of a love is a hell no philosophy can tidy. Nietzsche loved and was refused, not once but enough times to burn the vanity out of him. He proposed marriage to a brilliant woman and was declined twice. He thought he could build a future with minds as sharp as his, and instead found himself in a triangle of light and irony that split him open. In the aftermath, he could have turned bitter, and sometimes he did. But bitterness is just grief that refuses to move. He walked. He worked. He stared into the distance until it stared back. He learned to live with the fact that some longings will be companions with no destination. The suspense of walking away is not what happens after you leave. It's the suspense of not knowing who you are without the weight you put down. Nietzsche returned, in thought, to the figure of the tightrope walker. You climb toward the air on a rope stretched over the city. The crowd jeers and claps, but their noise is not for you. It is for the spectacle of risk they have outsourced to your body. Midway across, a clown leaps and taunts, and you fall, not because you were weak, but because the rope is not a place to argue. Zarathustra, the voice Nietzsche invented to carry his heaviest truths, lifts the dying man and walks away from the square with the corpse on his back. He takes his loss into the mountains. He does not ask the crowd for their opinion. He buries what must be buried and continues. Every person who leaves must perform a similar ritual. You carry a dead version of yourself long enough to give it a proper funeral. You don't parade it through the town. You don't ask for sympathy. You give it a name, you thank it for getting you this far, and then you lay it down where the wind can keep it. If you skip this, the corpse rides your shoulders for years, and the herd calls that loyalty. Psychology gives us tidy names for the forces that hold us: sunk cost, loss aversion, status quo bias. Nietzsche would have smiled at the plainness of those labels, and then called them what they feel like: gravity. Habits accumulate like planets, and soon your life is an orbit you can't feel. The cunning of the familiar is that it wraps itself in your identity. It says, "Without me, you are no one." It says, "Without us, you will vanish." And because it is polite, because it lends you a language and a routine, you confuse its comfort with your worth. Nietzsche's suspicion was ruthless. Much of what we call character is just inertia with a mask. He saw the herd not as a group of bad people, but as a machine built to protect itself from change. It values safety and calls it goodness. It values predictability and calls it truth. It will praise the rebel who gives speeches and sells books, and then returns home in time for dinner. It despises the one who quietly steps out of the parade and begins to build elsewhere. Affairs of the soul do not photograph well. So Nietzsche proposes a different metric of strength, the ability to put distance between you and what diminishes you without turning that distance into a banner. He calls this the pathos of distance, not to glorify coldness, but to honor the heat you need for creation. If you're too near, you catch their fever. If you're too far, you forget how to speak human. Walk away far enough to see the pattern, close enough to still care. You don't announce it. You don't argue it. You cultivate the discipline of non-response. When someone tries to drag you back into a conflict you've quietly refused, you remember that not every knock is an invitation. When the group asks where you went, you point to your work. When your own fear asks whether you're allowed to leave, you tell it what Nietzsche told himself on the mountain. If this moment would return to you infinitely, would you accept it with joy? If not, change it now, because eternity is not a place. It's your habit. To continue what hurts you is to make your pain immortal. The suspense peaks at a strange moment, the day the noise goes quiet and you realize you are alone with your choice. No one is chasing you. No one is celebrating. There is just you, a road, and the weight of a life that cannot be outsourced. This is where walking away either collapses into posture or ripens into power. If you left for attention, the silence will drive you back. If you left for the right to shape your hours honestly, the silence will begin to sing. We think decisions are about the future, but Nietzsche's most ruthless test for a choice steals its authority from eternity. In a parable he kept returning to, a demon visits you at your darkest hour and whispers that you will live your life again, down to the last detail, not once, but endlessly. Every hesitation, every meal, every argument, every night you stayed because you were tired. Would you curse the demon, or would you say, "You are God, and never have I heard anything more divine"? This is not theology. It is an instrument with one function: to expose what you are willing to live with forever. If the thought of repeating your current compromises fills you with a quiet dread, that dread is a compass. The insight cuts two ways. It is not only an indictment of what makes you small, it is also a hymn to what you would choose again. Nietzsche called this love of fate Amor Fati, not with a sentimental sigh, but with the grit of someone who had bled for it. To love your fate is not to paste a smile over harm. It is to arrange your life so that even your suffering is yours, not imposed by your loyalty to someone else's script. Walking away becomes part of that arrangement. You're not fleeing pain. You're choosing a pain that belongs to your growth. This refrains will to power, the phrase so often misread as a lust for domination. Nietzsche meant something more intimate and demanding, the will to shape the form of one's life. Power is selection. It is the artistry of deciding which influences to let near the workshop of your days. The strong person is not the one with the most followers. It is the one who knows how to curate the weather around their mind. They know that attention is the soil of becoming. They guard it the way a violinist guards her hands. Walking away, then, is a technique of selection. It is a way of saying, I refuse to let your urgency steal my rhythm. It is a refusal to be exhausted in the name of being good. It is the capacity to look at a long tradition and ask, does this make me more honest, more alive, more precise? Or does it ask me to dull my edges for the sake of belonging to an idea of goodness that resents my intensity? Nietzsche's critique of morality was not an invitation to cruelty. It was a demand that we uncover the motives beneath our gentleness. Are we kind because we are strong, or because we are afraid? He watches the modern conscience with an anatomist's patience. He sees how often should is a leash tossed by a trembling hand. He notices that whole communities build their peace around the avoidance of authentic conflict. They prefer agreement to truth. They prefer the soothing lie to the disruptive fact. If your soul begins to suffocate in such company, you will either become a polite version of yourself or a stranger with a secret. Nietzsche offers a third option. Become honest enough to leave, not as a martyr, but as a creator who needs room. The best revenge on a world that misunderstands you is not triumph. It's building something so alive that misunderstanding looks small beside it. Consider the way a real artist leaves. Not with a manifesto, but with a new work. She stops arguing and releases a piece that makes the argument irrelevant. She no longer plants her flag on someone else's hill. She plants a tree, and if it lives, it produces its own shade. Nietzsche tried to do this with his books. He wrote them to be discovered by those who needed them, which meant he accepted long seasons of ridicule and neglect. He refused to trade clarity for applause. This is what it means to value the long life of a thought over the short life of a reputation. There is a hidden connection here, not merely metaphorical. Nietzsche's body forced him to slow down, to reduce the trivial commitments that most of us use to keep from facing our deeper work. His migraines taught him a merciless economy. He could not afford cheap social obligations. He learned to defend clear hours the way a wounded animal defends its den. And in those hours, he discovered a rhythm that civilized life often smothers. Room for a sentence to arrive whole. Room for a doubt to ripen into a new conviction. Room for the kind of laughter that comes when you finally stop pretending you agree. It is tempting, when you hear this, to file it under asceticism, as if the point was simply to say no. Nietzsche hated that mistake. He wrote against the cold saints who make their refusal a crown. He knew how easily the discipline of walking away can curdle into a superiority that exists only to justify isolation. The most dangerous solitude is not loneliness. It is resentment disguised as purity. The true test of a clean exit is joy. If your silence does not lead you back to laughter, if your distance does not make you kinder, you're not walking away, you're just hiding. So the revelation turns here. Walking away is not an act of negation. It's a vote for a specific future. You are not abandoning the world. You are picking your version of it. You are protecting the space where your best work and your truest relationships become possible. A no that makes room for a larger yes is not selfish. It is the one generosity only you can offer. You stop training the people around you with a performance of martyrdom. You begin to show up where you can burn cleanly. Nietzsche's own yes took the form of sentences that move like weather. He wasn't building a doctrine. He was building a climate. Read him and you feel your lungs change. You feel your timidity exposed, your envy named, your craving for permission mocked gently, and then set on fire. You may not agree with him. That's fine. Agreement is not the goal. The goal is to wake up the muscle that recognizes when you are trading your life for a habit. The mountain path returns in his mind again and again. He sees the world spread below like a map designed to test him. Which valleys are fertile and which are comfortable deserts? Which peaks are beautiful only because other people think so? A strange gratitude grows. He thanks his failures for revealing the friends who are only there for the glow. He thanks his sickness for forcing him to find a diet that suits his temperament. He thanks even his heartbreaks for exposing the part of him that wanted to be rescued instead of whole. Gratitude that arrives after walking away is the opposite of bitterness. It is a signature, Your life, finally in your handwriting. If you need one clean rule from all this, take it from his paradoxical heart. Do not break bridges. Build elsewhere until they become unnecessary. The strongest departures don't poison the water behind you. They make it irrelevant. By the time the old gatekeepers notice you're gone, you've learned a language they don't speak. You have friends they cannot see. You have work that asks for your whole attention, not the noisy fraction you had left after arguing. You walk past the ruins of the debate and into the orchard. And what of the fear that you will vanish without the familiar witnesses? Nietzsche would answer with a shrug and a smile that is almost cruel. Disappear then. Vanish from the wrong eyes so that you can be seen where it matters. The people who need your voice are not in the room. You are afraid to leave. They are waiting by the road, where the air is thinner and the sentences cut cleaner. They are making a space for the person you become when you are no longer trying to be brave for the wrong crowd. Loneliness has a texture. It is not just the absence of voices. It is the presence of echo. After you walk away, the echo can feel like judgment. You rehearse the conversations you didn't have, the explanations you decided not to give. You imagine the look on a face you used to need. It's easy to mistake this for a sign that you were wrong. Nietzsche invites you to treat loneliness as weather. Weather passes. Character remains. He knew the nights when the body hurts, and the mind won't respect the truce. He knew the mornings when courage feels like a suit that doesn't quite fit. He lived without the legitimacy we chase from institutions and crowds. He endured the kind of slander that sticks better than praise. He found joy anyway. Not the sugar of approval, but the sour, nourishing joy of calling your own bluff. You say, I will live by my measure. And then you do. The day you pull that off feels like sunrise after an illness you didn't know you had been living with for years. In Turin, before his mind finally broke under a burden we still don't understand, he walked the streets with an odd happiness. He wrote letters full of light and small pleasures. A melody heard through a window, a well-cooked meal, the way a winter sun warms the stones without asking for anything back. He had simplified his days until the smallest things had room to be large. There is a tenderness here that surprises people who know only the steel and the hammer. He loved dancing metaphors because he loved the feeling of moving lightly in a world that demands heaviness. He was trying in his way to become the kind of creature who could carry pain without converting it into obligation. There's a modern translation for this. In a culture that monetizes your attention, walking away is an act of love toward your own mind. You leave the infinite scroll, the rooms that keep rewarding your outrage, the conversations that turn you into a predictable bundle of reactions. You replace the addictive rhythm with a slower one. You go for a literal walk. You let your thoughts stretch until they stop snapping back. You learn what you actually think, which is a frightening, liberating experience. Nietzsche would not have survived the feed. He would have found the off switch. He would have told you, the gentlest way he knows, that your life depends on doing the same. He treasured the tiny rituals that anchor a life lived beyond the crowd. Good bread, clean water. A bench with a view of something that does not ask to be bought. A page you return to not to be entertained, but to be calibrated. You can feel the medicine in such things when you've been breathing the air of a room that steals your oxygen. The emotional gravity of walking away is not only the sadness of leaving, it is the relief of returning to a body and a mind that are not constantly performing defense. People will call this selfish. Let them. The world needs fewer exhausted saints and more people who do one thing with undivided presence. Nietzsche's harshness was aimed at the part of us that wants to please everyone and then secretly blames them for the resentment that follows. He wanted to cut that knot with a single motion. Disappoint early. Disappoint often. Disappoint with grace. The result is a life that reveals your real loyalty. You are loyal to what makes you most alive. You are loyal to the few people who can meet you there. Everyone else gets your kindness, but not your days. There is grief. Don't dodge it. You grieve the version of you that fit perfectly inside the old story. You grieve the dream you had of being loved for staying small. You grieve the shared language you will never speak as fluently again. Grief is not a sign you chose wrong. It's a sign you are not stone. Nietzsche, a caricature of hardness, had a soft heart that bled easily. He was wounded by rejection, by misunderstanding, by the way his sentences found readers, only after it was too late for him to enjoy their company. And still he wrote with the unsentimental tenderness of someone who refuses to make his pain someone else's cage. Think of nature. The tide recedes, not in anger, but in rhythm. The tree lets go of leaves that no longer carry the sap. The sky clears without apology after a storm that had every right to stay. We do not accuse them of betrayal. We call it season. Nietzsche wanted our lives to have seasons again, not the endless fever of performing relevance for strangers. He believed that a person who can leave is a person who can return with gifts that were impossible inside the old agreements. Not every exit saves you. Some are just a new theater for the same bad habits. How do you know the difference? The right exit reduces your bitterness. It makes you laugh more easily. It increases your capacity to admire without wanting to own. It deepens your appetite for work that scares you just enough. It makes your silence fertile. The wrong exit is noisy, even when you're alone. It fills your solitude with arguments you're still trying to win. It feeds on humiliation and calls it memory. Nietzsche's test was simple. Can you dance after you leave? Maybe not at first, but soon, eventually. Does the beat return? Nobody told you this would be romantic. It is not. It is dignified. There is a nobility in declining to rehearse the same fight for the 100th time. There is grace in answering a message with no reply because the conversation is over, even if the words haven't admitted it. You are not the judge. You are the one who remembers there is a door. The world will try to seduce you back with what you miss most: warmth, praise, certainty. It will offer you your old chair. It will say, "We've changed." Sometimes it's true. Most times it's a longing dressed as progress. Nietzsche would advise caution. Return only if the change is in you. Return only if your spine remains sovereign. Return only if you can walk out again without drama. That is the secret. The door is not a one-time gamble. It is a muscle. You preserve its strength by using it gently and often. In the end, the emotional gravity of walking away is the feeling of finally being trusted by yourself. You hand your life back to the part of you that knows the difference between endurance and devotion. It is a clean, quiet relief. You listen. You notice. You build. And when the night comes, when the doubts gather like old neighbors, you do not argue. You put on your coat. You go for a walk. The road remembers you. Let's return to the stone on the mountain, to the noon that cuts time into two halves with a blade, so fine you cannot see it. You have heard the demon's question now. You have tested your rooms. You have watched the herd pass, its music bright and dull at once. You have counted the doors and found at least one that opens when you stop insisting. What do you do with this knowledge? You do not preach. You practice. Tomorrow morning you will be asked, in 100 minor ways, to sell your attention to the nearest bidder. You will be offered the chance to spend your courage on small victories that don't matter after lunch. Remember Nietzsche's cruelty in service of your clarity. The little betrayals teach your muscles how to fail the big tests. Each time you say yes against your measure, you tint your eternity by one shade. Walking away is not about grand gestures. It is about the cumulative practice of choosing a life you would repeat. If this sounds like weight you don't want, it should. Weight builds strength. But strength is not the grimace we've been taught. Strength is a lightness earned. It's the way your steps feel when you're no longer dragging the anchor of what no longer fits. You can feel, in your bones, The difference between leaving and escape. Escape is frantic and leaves a mess. Leaving is tidy. Escape runs from a monster and arrives breathless at another door that looks familiar. Leaving looks back calmly, bows if needed, and walks into air that hasn't learned your name yet. Do not make a religion out of it. Nietzsche would be the first to mock the cult of departure. The point is not to turn your back on everything. The point is to become the kind of person who can stay without becoming small and leave without becoming bitter. It's a kind of sovereignty that shows in the shoulder and the voice. People feel it. They don't know why they trust you more when you are willing to go, but they do. You are not bargaining for your value. You are not annexing their approval to complete your map. You carry your weather. You share it generously, and when it begins to rain envy, you quietly move on. What about the ones you love who cannot come with you? What about the rooms that raised you? There is a way to honor them that does not require your return. Become the proof that their best hopes for you were not small. If they wanted you safe, show them a safety built from truth, not compliance. If they wanted you successful, become the kind of success that is measured by the quality of your days. If they wanted you happy, let them see a happiness that doesn't depend on their theater. Love that cannot tolerate your door is not the love you owe your life. And what if you walk and the road ends? What if you come to a cliff and the map laughs? Nietzsche would say, good. The world is bigger than your memory. You sat for too long in rooms where answers came quicker than questions. Now you get to be a beginner again. Stand at the edge. Feel the cold. Do not hurry to call it failure. This is where the new work begins, a kind only your exact temperament can do. You will feel ridiculous. You will be tempted to run back to the last place you were fluent. Resist. Stumble. Learn a new grammar for your day. The early stages of a real life always feel like incompetence. Let the eternal return be a friend, not a threat. If the day is terrible, you are free to make it less terrible by an inch that multiplies through eternity. If the day is good, you are free to savor it as if you were promising to savor it again and again. The more you practice this, the less you fear the demon's whisper. He will come at midnight and find you already awake, smiling, with ink on your hands and a pair of shoes near the door. You will say, I know, I chose this. Return as often as you like. If you need an image to carry with you, carry this. A key that works on no door, but opens every room. Walking away is that key. It does not break locks. It makes them uninteresting. It does not conquer. It renders conquest small. It turns the focus from walls to paths, from permission to movement. You become the person for whom the world rearranges, not because you demand it, but because you are too alive to be furniture. There is a last tenderness I want to leave with you, and it is not Nietzsche's harshness, but his hope. He wanted us to become who we are. It sounds like a tautology until you realize how rarely we attempt it. Becoming who you are is a walk without applause. It's the patient assembly of a self that can stand its own company. It is the refusal to punish others for our fear by asking them to carry what we must carry alone. It is the humility to learn and the pride to refuse what insults the shape your life is taking. So at the next threshold, be it a job that drains you because it flatters you, a friend who loves your weakness more than your strength, a crowd that rewards your outrage, a belief that shrinks your question's pause. Feel the gravity. Listen to the echo. Test it with the only measure that matters. Would you live this again? If not, step gently. Close the door softly. Walk away, not because you are above them, but because you have work to do that cannot be done there. Let your absence be a kind of letter. I am not far, but I am not available for this. You will be misunderstood. You will be accused of cruelty. You will sometimes be cruel, and you will apologize. You will sometimes be wrong, and you will return. You will often be right, and you will keep going. You will grow lighter. You will find a few who know what your silence means, and meet you on the path with bread and the story. Together, you will build a place worth staying. And when it is time to leave that, too, you will know. You will have the key. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.